the thing that I wanted to share was this article describing what in popular economics zeitgeist people have been referring to as a K-shaped economy, right? That right now 10% of consumers drive 50% of consumption, and like the rest of the 90% are kind of falling off. And it has to do with your ability to maintain your status, and that's based off of asset ownership and not based off of productivity or labor, right? It
Oh
used to
yeah,
be,
that's yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So it's doing this, and when we talk about fashion retail, like the ability of purchasers at the top 10% is going like this, and that's what's driving the economy right now. But then
And
ninety
that's what's
percent of
driving
consumers are
price
doing this.
increases.
Exactly, exactly. But it's driving price increases and also other things, right?
Yeah.
So if we can talk about both ends of the K-shape, and I think retailers are smart and they have options for both of these markets. They're not unaware that this is happening in the economy. And so for me, the bottom, what I associate with the bottom of the K. For people who are losing purchasing power as the economy is growing more and more towards the needs of capital owners, is that you're turning into products like makeup and such, but more so than it just as a product category being like an entry point. The fact is that they're consumable, like in foods, experiences, hotels, this
Yeah.
sort of thing. These are consumable products more so than they are necessarily just being easy to manufacture or being entry level to begin with. The fact that like the products are a sort of rent on your ability to access the brand. It's rent
Right.
behavior. It's like Adobe Photoshop being a rental product instead of an actual license you can buy and have for the
Yeah. Yeah.
rest of your life, right? And that's what's being served now to the bottom of the K. And then the top end of the K, what you're describing with like, why does everything have to be, more private? Why does everything have to be stealthy and so on and so forth? There's this, I think, a feeling of fear as wealth inequality grows and grows, and the people who have the havers are growing less and less, and the have-nots are growing more and more. There's a fear about security, right? There's a fear that the geopolitical situation might boil and escalate, and that politics might become more populist and less friendly towards people with capital, and that one being Mark Zuckerberg might feel prompted to build underground bunkers in Hawaii, right? And
And in New
so
Zealand.
exactly, exactly. And so what will happen, as I believe, you'll have more and more of the middle of the sort of retail space, the Nordstroms, the Sacks, and so on and so forth. That sort of space will sort of disappear, as those are more of like hagiographical museums to the like ready to wear stuff that takes like a lot of space to store, and the consumers of that will either move online where like the margins are a bit better, right, for in terms of selling these things that take up a lot of physical space to like retail, and or just it not being accessible at all, and having more and more like individual like outlets for just specifically beauty, which have a much higher return on investment per square foot of real estate presence, right? It's just a lot more dense in terms of like what it's actually physically retailing. And in the same way that a Wingstop is more dense than a Buffalo Wild Wings, if that makes sense. It's a very American way of speaking about revenue per square foot. But Wingstops are happening. Rick Ross is a very rich man.
Shout out to Rick Ross. Great
Yes.
investment.
Exactly, exactly. And that's specifically because of like their model of not having a dining space. You order it to like take out and so on and so forth. And it's all very dense in terms of like the product offering. Anyway, what was I saying? I think the future is you'll have stylists who either work for a house like Kering, or they're they'll have individual brands that they've gather and have a following, and they'll, instead of being just somebody who like is somebody who serves in a professional capacity for an event, it'll be somebody who like takes the collections directly from the houses as a sort of like micro buyer, and takes whole collections to these castles that these people with money that they've built walls around and compounds that are secure and can insulate them from like the problems of like having to live in a society. And that's where the actual, it's not online at all, it's actually super hyper local in that they bring the collections to you, right? They'll have like a food truck equivalent of like these high end goods, and the exclusive items will be shown exclusively to you in your own environment or in event settings, sort of like what high jewelry does now, where like they'll have events, they'll invite you, they'll fly you up to a chalet where you can go skiing and also see the new line of high jewelry. It'll be like that. It'll be very experienced, be very one-on-one with high net worth consumers who are spending millions at these brands, and it'll all be about the personal brand of the buyer slash shopper slash stylist who's bringing the collections to you. And the sort of like idea of like a department store where you're like having to gather amongst a riffraff in order to like make your retail decisions is going to die off as you go higher and higher in this K and lower in this K. You don't want to interact in between these two economies. And that's where I think the future of retail is going.
Because obviously there's a safety issue when that interaction is happening, right? Because obviously there's a lot of animosity in terms of like the economy being that way. But we've known it to be that way because obviously the reason why luxury brands have hiked prices so much is because they've done research and found it makes financial sense to just cater to the market that's on the top of the K, like what you're saying. And you can't mix those consumers when it gets so dystopian that it's literally like one side is like struggling to eat, but they're still kind of like fighting each other, and then the other side is just kind of like in the ivory tower buying jackets for $1 million. We might literally get to that point if we haven't through couture already. So no, what you're saying is true. What you're saying is very true.
I have a fun comment to make on that, that at least they learned from Marie Antoinette example. They will not be having their heads decapitated, compared to that, where exactly like the extravagance led to that. Because I mean, like, I feel we're really going back, circling back to these inequalities in the past. You had people that were dressed in rags and people that had all this kind of fabulous clothes. And it's so sad that we're heading that direction.
I do think we're heading towards let them eat acne
Yeah,
studios.
yeah.
It's a really reasonable thing to say.
Yeah, Al, I really love your sentiment and what you said. There's one part of that though that I think that needs to be added, and just to widen the scope a little bit. And one of those major things is that being an influencer is a day job. Like, that is possibly one of the more viable career paths out today for Gen Z and Gen Alpha. I want to say that again. Being an influencer is a career path. So what we have is telesales on the individual person to person level. So exactly what you said, right, with these little mobile people, but they're not just mobiles. Those are people with actual phones, and they're going around to, like you said, the chalet, and they're showing people. So that is not just part of the marketing strategy, that's part of the sales strategy, and that's part of the customer acquisition strategy as well. So maybe like, and this is what I kind of love about Jacquemus and certain other brands as well, where it's like when you go to the Jacquemus retail store, it is actually like you're being transported into a different space. Like, their retail space is so unique, or at least it's so them, that we can sense that there is a personality there. And that's the same thing with Rick Owens and certain other stores as well. Loewe, for instance, you can see that. But there's the other step, right? How do we connect to these people? And it's getting those individuals that kind of allow this thing to thrive and people aspire to be, and becoming their influencers. Now, there's certain brands that don't have like particular influencers, but what do they have instead, right? They have like artists, particularly. So some will only go for painters, for instance, and some will only go for athletes, and some will only go for actors. But it's okay, maybe I can't get, what's like, name, insert big Hollywood actress here, right? Scarlett Johansson, for instance. Maybe I can't get her, but maybe I can get the biggest girl on TikTok. And that is kind of like the scales of which these companies are currently working at, where it's like, I can't get Scarlett, but I can get D'Amelio, for instance. And these people are more personable, just like the girl at the store and at the beauty store. And I relate to this girl more than I relate to Scarlett Johansson. And it's transformed now. So yeah, That's kind of like one of the other bits that I feel like is added to the scope of what you said, where it's like, okay, yeah, the retail experience is not just shifting from these mobile places, but it's like it's through the phones that they are communicating.
Yeah.
And that's only possible because being an influencer is actually a career path. Like it's, oh, I can not go to university and I can post, or not even not go to university, but while I'm in university, I can be posting 20, 30, 40 times a day, grow my audience to 50 or 60K, do all of the growth hacking things. And then now I'm an influencer. And then now I can grind my way to the top. Wisdom K style.
Yeah.
Wisdom K style, that's crazy. Also, just to address something quickly,
Yeah.
Yeah, influencers are the new Avon salespeople for sure. Definitely. Like beauty influencers, like we know, they're the biggest, they're the greatest, they're a massive entryway for people into luxury beauty, Korean skincare, for
Sure.
instance. You know what I mean?
But to me, at least, the big difference is that like people like Wisdom and a lot of influencers, they're there to service the retail needs of like the lower half of the K.
That's
K
what I was going to
True.
say. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. You cannot compare
Definitely.
them. Yeah. I mean,
Of
the
course,
best
yeah.
example of all that is the wife of Jeff Bezos. It is just like friends now with Anna Wintour, and she's gonna host the new. To me, that's very frustrating because of
sponsoring-
yeah.
Money,
By the way,
money is access.
now that's the problem, because if everything is driven by money alone, we end up with situations like that. Okay, money
And
is
no
important.
creativity.
Yeah, but if in all fields, in healthcare is the same. I mean, if we want to talk about broader, even education, if we care about profit alone, humanity is not going to do well on so many levels.
I want to say
Because,
though,
yeah,
I do love that mentality, but the one thing that I have to add to that is like, were we certain that the Met Gala, for instance, was just running off its own strength before? And is it that the people who have the money are just out in the open now, rather than, oh, this has been a profitable venture since the beginning? Because I don't think it has been. It has been a loss leader, but it's also a place for people to, make their mark. Do you know
I'm
what I
not
mean?
sure Met Gala a loss leader, because that's what funds the institute, right? It's like there are a set number of tickets that all the brands have to pay for to be
Yeah,
there.
of course, yeah.
And then the brands obviously select what celebrities they bring. Now, there's a huge ecosystem around the Met Gala. I know stylists that have been paid millions just to style one person at the Met Gala. Like, that's how much money is like going around during the Met Gala. So I think now they've just changed the strategy, because before the Met Gala was kind of like an intimate thing. I think now, due to all the celebrity fanfare, especially over the 5 years and like everyone covering the Met Gala, they've realized we should turn this into an event like a la the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Or like where we have broadcasting rights and people are fighting to broadcast the Met Gala, and then we can generate even more money. And that's where you have like big people coming on board like Jeff Bezos to kind of help facilitate that.
Yeah, but I mean, financing it is in one thing, and then putting as a host, which is a very symbolic, not symbolic, but like it's a very important role. Putting somebody who is not in fashion and who clearly doesn't have any taste neither. It's very, but sorry, but I cannot take that.
Okay,
At that point,
before
at
we
that
like
price
get
point,
all
you can
like
buy
eat
taste.
the rich, all right?
No,
think there's
no, dear, you cannot buy taste. Taste you can never buy, actually. And that's a great thing. I used to say that's the revenge. You would never have
whatever
taste,
Law
no matter
Roach,
how much the money.
whatever
there's
Law
something-
Roach says they should pay him is them buying taste for sure.
No, but even though she wears that, she still looks equally vulgar. So
But
the
she's a
proof is,
participant, right? Like,
yeah,
who
yeah.
was that famous wife who, like, I think it was the wife of, like, a baron, like, of von Bismarck, or maybe, who, like, cried for 6 days when Balenciaga shut down his atelier, right? Like, these are people who are that's your perfect consumer, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
this sort of hagiographical worship of, like, the creative worlds that the creative directors can create. That's your perfect consumer. You want as many of those people as possible. You want to involve as many of like the well-heeled as possible within your brand and your storytelling, that they feel like an active participant and it's a personal like part of their identity. This is what you want to build, right? And you must, I don't know, parasitize off of like that as like I think a business owner, in order to have the runway to complete the legacy of creative progress that I think that you can have, because you have this runway. And the only thing I think of is like that the ephemera of like the process of fashion and the process of design is that tail and a body of work that you're able to create through this runway. It feels kind of mercenary. It doesn't feel particularly ethical, I think, to service again the vulgarity of these princes and princesses.
I feign to be like to think that this hasn't been how it's always been.
Yeah,
Like
I
we
agree.
kind of have always, not always, but within the past 10 years, so long as we're of age, we've been talking about why aren't rich people rich and right? That's a conversation that's happening on social media. That why aren't our rich people cool? Why aren't our
What's the name of
wealthy?
that Instagram page? Rich people, they're rich, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, we literally have had this conversation. So like, for as much as we say, oh, they're like this, they're like that, this person isn't necessarily who I would like. However, it's who we've got now. Is she putting the right people in places? It should be our question, right? Or is it just some nepotistic, parasitic relationship that is gonna maul and disintegrate the very fabric of why we love the Met Gala in the first place? And
Yeah,
that's the
that's
question.
your answer.
That's
Yeah.
the valuable question we ask ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
if she does that and it's terrible, then yeah, our rich people still ain't rich and right. But for at least my generation and lower, that is what everyone's been asking. Like, what's the name of the people who had that $1 billion wedding in India?
Barney's?
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
people, like, I believe it was like for a week at least. I'm sure it was I saw videos for a month.
I think it was longer than a week. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna
it was, well, yeah. I'm just trying to be conservative in my estimate, but people are like, why are their rich people acting like this, and we've got these people as our rich people? So I like, what do you guys personally think about that? But for me, this is in quotes our rich people rich in right if they do it well.
Honestly, I believe it's totally irrelevant, as the rich people, regardless of whether or not they're good at styling or have stylists who take care of them and advance, their aesthetic agenda as like celebrities, or their personal aesthetic needs and wants, right? Like, I think outside of that, they're downstream of the creative process. You can obviously end up being a muse of like a designer if like there is like a strong relationship and there's some creativity because of that. But I think they're all just downstream of this. They're the same.
When you say they're downstream, what do you mean by that?
As in, like, I believe, like, it used to be like a situation where celebrity was reserved for a particular status. Like, I'm thinking of like people who were groundbreaking stylists, like the Prince of Wales Czech guy, whoever that guy was. He was the Prince of Wales, and at one point he popularized Glen Czech because of his personal style. He didn't have a stylist, that he just liked the way it looked and he wore it, and it became a popular thing that has reverberated through generations of menswear and menswear designers and stuff. There's that, and obviously Jeff Bezos' wife is not going to be able to do that because maybe it's too much of a manufactured good that she's just buying straight up.
I don't
But I
know.
think that downstream again of the houses, which to me are the important part. They're the ones producing the runway shows. They're the ones making the mode. They're the ones making the fashion, right? And if they choose to be inspired by their clientele, that's their prerogative. But the premise, to me, I think, is that it shouldn't matter if the rich people are rich and right, as long as they're consuming enough to build the runway for the designer's
This
product.
this person this person isn't like, they're not just a consumer though. Like, I think like she bought in at the top of the pyramid, not at the bottom of the pyramid.
It doesn't
they're
matter
trying to
where they buy
control
in.
how the system works.
Yeah,
But
like when a rich person buy like more something like this, that she's at the top. She's not knowing, like, when someone is a billionaire, as we all know, it's like they buy in at the top. They're not trying to just buy clothes and have no influence or say. That's where I'm confused in what you're saying.
Yeah, and the Russian queen who like got really into Rasputin also bought in at the top of what Rasputin was selling. But like, it doesn't matter. It's all about like how
No,
much.
okay, wait. Let's put it like this. I love the Russian example, right? Fabergé eggs. When they wasn't just consumers of Fabergé eggs, they changed the whole designs of why they were creating Fabergé eggs. So the whole family definitely like had their say. They did buy it, but then at the same time, it's like, okay, now we're telling this story. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's just one thing that Fabergé is known for, right? They also make perfumes.
No, we're talking, but before the monarchy got down, it was we're making very distinct, not jewelry, but like centerpieces made from very fine metals and minerals, right? And that's the same thing with like Cartier, for instance, right? With Cartier, it's like the rich people bought it, and it was like, yeah, there was some fine rich people that were just like lawyers and doctors, and but then once it got to the princes and the princesses, it changed everything. Now there's a tiger at the handle, and it's like there's a snake, and there's all of these animals that distinctly change
But
why we love Cartier in the first place. Anastasia, what's up? I would love to hear what you think.
yeah, I just want to say that, yeah, that was that opulence of that time is not the way rich people of today mostly are approaching clothing in particular. I mean, what we said before with discussing with Ayo was that very often it's the consumer, even on that high end, like LV, for example, that in a way dictates, that is circling back, dictates what the brand will produce. And so, of course, there is this interaction and back and forth because they want to sell. And for me, in all that, the problem is that we only care about consumption and nothing else. There is no other perspective. For me, it's very problematic that somebody as tasteless as this woman or many other like her, she's not an exception actually. That's the problem also. She's not an exception in that. We have to see them as hosts in an event that is, of course, financed by rich people, but it's supposed to be for fashion people. And if we, in the end, care only about consumption, we will end up in fashion only with very wealthy people who buy this very discreet kind of fashion. And in the end, there will be no personas and no intellectual people and no interesting people, because the problem is very often very wealthy people are not necessarily intellectuals and they're not necessarily people with taste. And that, to me, is an issue in itself, because these people have a lot of power and they're going to dictate a lot of things. And
But
one of
they
them
don't
will be
they don't
creating,
control the valves of culture anymore. The fact that there's the level playing field of social media means that Wisdom K is able to provide the exact same amount of influence to the zeitgeist of fashion, of mode, that the Lauren Bezos, I think that's her name, or is that the ex? I forget.
Yeah.
I think Lauren Bezos is
Lauren's
the
the new
main
Lauren,
one.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Laura
Wow.
Sanchez.
Mackenzie is
Lauren
the
Sanchez
big, yes.
Bezos, yeah.
Yeah.
Lauren is a driver, obviously, because she picks and chooses, what might be part of some designer's legacy, and that legacy will be colored by them. Yes, like at one point, Lalique and Fabergé were sort of equal, and because of the legacy of their product, specifically for the Russian monarchy, that colored Fabergé's legacy. But I don't think that's all they make, and they're probably proud of the stuff that they've also made outside of that. And because of this pluricity, the fact that we're not limited to only, viewing the celebrity of, say, the Prince of Wales, we've got, people who are influencers online, who are stylists online, who have shared their ability to style and create a new cultural zeitgeist that is at the cutting edge, because the street is always where the cutting edge comes from, almost never from the top down.
You're
Because
right,
there's a
but of
plural
course.
vision, I don't think it's a situation where we have to be that concerned about the ultra rich driving everything, because they don't have a monopoly on our attention. They don't have a monopoly on the zeitgeist. There's too many options.
I guess
have a monopoly.
I think
Yeah.
what Dami is saying is like, because what you're saying is like, in the economy that we're in, you can have as much influence as someone that seemingly has more influence due to power of money. But the difference, and I think where Dami is saying something, is that I can get the same attention that a rich person can get. I can influence more people than a rich person, but ultimately it's the rich person's decision if they want to stop something because they own it, or if they want to close this brand because they own it, or if they want to hire this creative director and go in this direction because they own it. So it's like,
Yeah.
I can influence more people on how they think, but then the decision still gets made by the person that is on top, that has the ownership, if that makes sense, which comes with
Yes.
an influence in and of itself. It's a different kind of influence, but that influence
Yeah.
affects like a lot of things that happen.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I meant by that.
Yeah, like I guess like maybe I hope this analogy lands, but like the influencers are the waves on top of the sea, right? So they're the little waves that you can see on top of the sea, but the rich people are the current. They're the movement that happens under the sea that can sweep you up and swallow you whole. It's like today I asked a question in the chat and I really wanted to know, like, who are the wealthy benefactors of today? Like, And I think like everybody that works in a creative industry has somebody that is wealthy that know they're in a network of wealthy people, right? And they've got opportunities because of that. And then there is the super duper wealthy, right? Which is like, let's say the people who decide whether we go to shows or not. Like, because one thing that I think is important is like, yeah, Wisdom K has got great influence, but does he go to all the shows, and does the fashion industry care about him that way?
I mean,
And
I think the fashion
he can make
industry does, but
he
the
can make
luxury industry maybe not.
no
I
no
think right.
he
There's
he can make as many videos as he wants. I've not seen him front row at Hermes, not once. I've not seen him influence.
I agree, because he drives again towards the gray market. He's not driving towards Hermes.
Yeah, he drives consumerism. Like, he's a product of consumerism. So it's like, okay, grand. And Wisdom is literally one of my favorite influencers. However, if we're going to talk about it in this sense, right, and then in a wider economy sense, then he doesn't necessarily move the needle like Lauren Sanchez is. Like, she's like, we've known her for 5 minutes.
It's about degrees of influence, right? And
we've dedicated half-hour conversations.
In order for somebody to stay in Lauren's good graces, they need to be perceived as being cutting edge and of being of cultural worth, and that their brand is producing something that she wants to buy into the world and fantasy of, right? She's a customer just like us, right? She has to be able to like figure out that there's something there for her to patronize. And that what happens is that like the street eventually will dictate what the mode is based off of either the fact that they have to go to the gray market or go to vintage for inspiration. That will eventually start trickling up in the sense that like there's a reason why there's knockoff speed cats in the Louis Vuitton show. Like those super flat, like that comes from the fact that that silhouette was introduced, obviously, you know, maybe in terms of visualization and popularization from some, you know, designers, but it caught on in the streets. People like that. They like the Puma speed cats. They like the like ballet flat things that they did from Balenciaga, so on and so forth. That caught on, and that eventually trickled back into the product offering at LV, obviously with, you know, much higher quality material, have you. But it eventually does make its mark. The needle does.
So you're saying we still have
1 or 100 thing.
That's generally what you're saying. Because Wisdom influence. Yeah.
It's a push and pull, right? Obviously, the high spending.
So, but you're saying we still have influence.
consumers
I think that's what
have
I'm getting from what you're saying.
But their ability to participate in a brand comes from the brand's ability to respond to us from mode, not from luxury.
I don't know. Well, when you say us, do you mean the people who actually buy it?
No, who
us.
produce the visual culture. Public. The people who are in fashion and produce the fashion culture are the ones that the designers respond to. At least right now. Maybe there are that just do not care about that at all, right? And like we don't move their needle. Maybe Hermes considers themselves one of those companies, maybe, and that's that. And then I just drop out of them being understood as being participant in the culture.
I hear it. Ayo, can I talk about something funny?
Go on.
See that influence. You know what? Do you know what's so interesting, guys? And Anastasia and I hope I don't lose you guys in this, but like I love that Prada cups are coming back in style. Like, does that make sense to you guys? Like,
it makes sense to me.
Like, okay,
it's because of this silhouette. It has the same silhouette as like those Dries Van Noten shoes that have come back. It just has that same silhouette.
Yeah, this is the thing, because it's what I was saying, right? It is the street influencing what is being made. So now, like, you can probably get Prada cups for a reasonable price on Depop now in about 7 to 8 months. You're not. One of the major reasons for that is because of exactly what I was saying, right? Is what they're creating. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, what the people are buying, and people love Prada cups at this point, right? Especially the people in the street. And then on the top level of the K, I guess if I would use our analogy, people are talking about the dirt on the sleeves and what that symbolizes in the Prada show. Right?
Yeah, that's a whole another discussion, yeah.
The sleeves, I still think, are the participation in fashion. Like that's a styling and like I would say kind of recession indicator.
I can't lie.
In the sense that it's not that much of a hot take from Prada in terms of like
my culture is not your style. Like I'll be like I worked hard for this.
You want me to show you my stained ass French cuffs?
Bro, I've got the most stains on my trench, on my Burberry one as well, and I promise you, it's not a style take.
You influence Prada.
I can't afford to take it to the proper cleaners. And I'm not trying to take it to the guy I'm gonna pay £7. That's gonna destroy it. That's what I don't want. But no, like I hear what you're saying. Al, is like you are giving us a little bit more credence for sure in terms of like our value add. At the same time, it's like for a lot of us, all we can do is commentate. Like I remember when I very, very first started, I had this series out, especially when I was a fashion illustrator, right? When I was a fashion illustrator, I was like, I'm gonna draw all the things I can't buy, and I literally just drew all of the clothes that I thought were cool, and I styled them in ways, and that was my first time like trying my hand at styling. And obviously I drew clothes before because I was actually like a animator, but that was me participating in fashion and then tagging the brands on Instagram and coloring them in and so on and so forth. That was like my participation. And for a lot of us, that's what our participation looks like, right? It is an article on Substack. It is chatting to our friends on TikTok Live. It is being in Discord and talking about fashion history and all of these other things, right? And that's where our value is. But what we're really doing is deepening our connection and enriching our connection to these companies that in reality don't care too deeply about us, because there can be a billionaire that comes in and says, yo, I want to buy this company now. And then they buy it. And then they change the whole movement of what this company is doing. And then people are like, whoa, what happened? But this is the thing, right? This is one of the good things. It's like the gent that bought Ferragamo and his company, he bought Ferragamo, and what did he do? He instilled or appointed Maximilian Davis, right? And now our whole generation, or at least for a lot of us in our generation, love what Maximilian is doing at Ferragamo. And then there was another person. What was the guy who bought Andamila Mista again? IO, please.
Claudio Antonio.
Yeah, he did that, and then he appointed somebody, and then people are like, yeah.
Yeah.
What's happening here? So
before Stefano, it was Ludovic de Sanson.
Yeah.
Conversation for another
Oh my
day.
god.
Yeah.
No.
So, but it can go both ways, right? And then now we have the Met, which is our Super Bowl. We like everybody remembers their first Met, and what was that was the first ever conversation I've had with somebody that was like, oh, did you see what so and so wore? I swear to you, before that time, I did not care what anybody. The last time I cared about that was in year 7 when somebody was wearing the same trainers as me on non-school uniform day. And then I swore I would never wear the same thing as. Oh, I went too niche.
Yeah, but the Super Bowl element, the players are the stylists. They're not the people wearing the clothes. They're very secondary.
Yeah. Without dragging it on, yeah, it's like it's important to us, but somebody did buy our Super Bowl essentially.
Yeah, I think what both of you are saying is kind of similar, because like Al's point
For sure.
is like the reason, kind of what Leo said. Al's point is the reason why like the LaFleur guy started bringing back that sort of 2010s era. As a result, Margiela re-released the Futures. If LaFleur didn't exist, they wouldn't re-release the Futures because there wasn't like a serviceable market. So that's what Al is saying. Like literally, the consumers have so much influence now. Like influencers have so much influence that like. You can influence a lot of people that is like irrespective of who's buying the brand. They're kind of, you've almost like forced Margiela's hand into having to re-release the shoes because an economy was kind of created by the influence of people posting on TikTok. So it's kind of, it happens both ways. It happens in both directions. But at the same time, the rich person can be like, is this what everyone likes? I'm going to remove it. Because they have power to do that. But I guess the drawback would be then they'll lose money because they'll take away something that sells well. So there is influence like coming from both directions.
Yeah, it's definitely a push and pull for sure. No, I 100% agree.
And my particular argument is that for companies that are interested in specifically fashion and not timelessness or whatever the fuck these luxury companies are going for, like the people who care about fashion, it has to be relevant to the current mode, right? It has to be relevant to what the world is. And that just comes from people. And most people are not the 10%.
Okay, back to that styling point, right? I think it was really important that you said it to the current mode, because that was also part of where the luxury consumer is going, right? Because when I was speaking directly on people buying vintage, right? We're hitting the 30-year mark for some of our favorite, like Tom Ford, Gucci, and Dior and everything like that. But what is really going directly into our vows and our value is like, and especially with people buying it on the gray market, is them wanting pieces that look like the period that they bought them from. So not just, oh, this is the same style, this the same black leather, so and so and so and so. It is, this looks like the 2002 show. This looks like the 2011-14 show. Like when I've got my styling clients now, they're asking me for particular items, and they're sending me particular items, and I'm IDing them, saying, yo, it's from this show, it's from this era. This is back when, Indie Sleaze was in. And they love being enriched that way, one. And two, that is the item that they're going to covet more than, just a black pair of jeans from any old show. Do you know what I mean? Because because that company still makes that jeans, and they would never want it mistaken for a 2026 pair. They want the skinny jean from the 2006 when skinny jeans were skinny jeans. And I think that's like really, really important when it comes to our consumer psychology, especially people on the more knowledgeable side of fashion today.
I mean, I think that's right in the sense that there are people who value the authenticity of the provenance, the fact that like this is actually a boot made in Tom Ford era or whatever, what have you. And for those people at the top who want that, they have, the archivists who, have all the nicest and most perfect versions of these dead stock 1 of 50 items.
No, for sure.
There's that, and then at the low end of the market, there's eBay. You just grab what comes and what you can get, right?
For real. Like, and I think that's market is gonna get really, really big, just like the Jordan market got big in the late 2010s. Where
and there'll be re-releases, like right now what Gucci is doing,
of course,
with like the super distressed jackies and what have you. There's an easy way for those with money to access the sort of visual culture of what that production
the cool people are doing.
Yeah, or like Louis Vuitton, the Murakami re-release and stuff
exactly. Like that. But guess what? The fashion forward person, especially the one that at least I style, right? They're not going to me saying, oh, they want the re-release. Do you know somebody? Da, 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 da.
Yeah, they want the original.
Exactly. They're like, I wouldn't be caught dead wearing the re-release because one, they know that it's not made well because I either told them or they're coming to me saying, oh, this thing was made terribly. So they have this higher level of value for certain pieces that are older. And this is the first time that is actually happening. But one thing that I can say is that the fashion companies, because of that, the fashion companies can't saturate the market like they saturated the market for Jordans and Air Force Ones. Because the reality is that a new Air Force One is actually better quality than an old Air Force One, because those things were made to be used within a year, and a new Air Force One that is someone's like from this particular collection has more value because it's newer and it's unworn. But people who wear in bags and wear in jackets and wear in skirts, they can still wear that denim. They can still wear that leather. They can still wear any whatever import fabric here. They can still clean that canvas. And there's so many videos of us cleaning these particular items and showing that we can restore them. But guess what? There isn't. There's people, or guess what there is for the trainers, right? There's people showing you how destroyed a 20-year-old pair of sneakers could be because they run their thumb along it and it crumbled to dust. So that's like kind of like the shift that I believe. At least this is my personal opinion. Nobody else needs to believe me. But the saturation will only add, the saturation by the fashion companies will only add to them coveting the older piece even more.
So let me add like a behavior of some houses to this mix. There's stock buybacks, that you can do as a finance company. There's an equal thing you can do as a fashion house, which is vintage buybacks. This is what the house of Patek Philippe does. They have a museum where they buy back their pieces with provenance and that are important to the history of the brand, and then they can lend those pieces out to their most valuable clientele. Obviously they can't keep them, but if they have a great relationship and you purchase millions upon millions of their watches, they'll be able to lend you 1901 manufactured railway stopwatch or whatever. They just have this museum of objects. And that's a way of accessing their heritage and their sort of value in their gray market that I think we're going to see some brands move towards.
This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.